Welcome back to Bible Curious Podcast. We are here today with such a lovely guest. Her name is Justice Kuehl. She was actually the longest reigning Miss Tennessee USA. No big deal. But she's also passionate about empowering women to embrace their identity as daughters of God and reclaiming their femininity and moving away from feminism or the war on women, which we know is going on. Yes. I just read her book, Feminist to Feminine. There were so many aha moments for me, you guys. So first of all, I'm going to link you guys to the book. You guys have to check it out, but we're going to dive into all the juicy parts that I know you're going to love. So welcome to the show, Justice.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to have this conversation. We've been planning it for a while, so my anticipation has been building.
And funnily, so we were supposed to record, I think it was last week, you guys, and you may have seen I posted on Instagram that I fell down the stairs. Is this horrible. The devil? Was the devil trying to stop our conversation?
Are you okay from that, by the way?
Yeah, I'm totally fine. I grabbed the railing and I wrenched my shoulder and my back a little bit. So I just literally laid down the entire day pretty much. And then I was fine the next day.
Okay, good. Praise the Lord. Because that's, also the terror while you're falling is always the absolute worst.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And I'm also was just embarrassed. I'm am I 5? Now I have to email someone and be sorry, I need a counselor meeting. I fell down the stairs. No.
It's okay. I'm very understanding. I have a 2-year-old son and he always wants me to carry him up and down the stairs, and I always feel like I'm going to fall, probably just because I'm nervous and falling while holding him. So I'm grasping on the railing.
Hold the railing.
I was listen, I feel that.
Okay. Okay, so I want to just hear the Kuehl's notes of how you got into the space of helping women tap into their femininity through their relationship with God, because you were at one point feminist. Yeah. So what did that look like, and how did you transition to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in a conservative Christian family, so you would not expect that I would have become a feminist and embracing a lot of very progressive feminist, values and worldviews. But my family relocated to Los Angeles when I was in college. And so I was in college there, and this is my community. The church I was going to was a little bit, going that direction. There's a lot of things sort of pushing me in that direction. I think culturally things were headed that way. But I'd also been through a couple experiences in my childhood of experiencing what I would probably consider real sexism or prejudice against specifically my mom. And watching that and thinking, my mom is amazing. Anybody who thinks anything else is crazy. And so note to self, there's people out there who have crazy ideas who just don't know. They've never met a really amazing woman, or they've never allowed themselves to get to know a woman in a way where they could even see that. Mm-hmm. I was homeschooled my entire life. So all of the women, all the people around me who are kind of forming me as a young woman were also women, because they're all the moms who are doing the homeschooling. So I'm looking around going, these people are really amazing. And so anybody who has a problem with them or thinks that they're less than because they're a woman, that's crazy. Mm. So that view sort of naturally developed into feminism once I'm, surrounded by a very progressive feminist culture living in Los Angeles. And I started competing in beauty pageants. I started competing in the Miss California USA system. And that's also those women who are competing are hardcore feminists. It's a very feminist environment because it's all about shattering glass ceilings, breaking people's expectations of what a woman can do. And there was a lot about that was really great, because I am a very big dreamer. I'm very ambitious. And so I had big ideas of what I'd like to do with my life. And it was the first time when I was around other women who didn't think that was crazy, or other people who didn't think that was crazy. They were like, cool, that's awesome that you want to do that crazy thing. Me too. So all of those things really created this environment around me that was encouraging of feminism. And a long story short, which I can get into some of the details of, I became disillusioned as I started seeing what feminism was actually doing. So we had all these like exciting ideas about feminism could, fix the wage gap, and feminism could help us with our problems that we're facing as women. And then I started experiencing challenges that are unique to women and realizing feminism didn't care. And the people who were the loudest feminists around and in media and in my life didn't care about these issues. So for me specifically, like the biggest thing is that I suffered from endometriosis for a decade before getting a diagnosis. And then I was able to have a life-changing surgery that thankfully I don't deal with that at all anymore. But for those years, never once was that talked about. Never once did the feminists, the Women's March, the signs that they're holding, I didn't see anybody talking about endometriosis.
Yeah,
And
they weren't fighting for women's health as it related to actual health
actual
issues.
health.
Yeah.
They would fight for like abortion rights under the guise of women's health, but they were never talking about like real issues. So
Yeah.
on top of that, at least 10% of women suffer from endometriosis. They think it's more like 40% of women now.
Wow.
And then, if you add to that PCOS, which is similar, and a couple of these other things, you were talking about like a very big plurality of women who are dealing with these things, and the feminist movement was not talking about it. And that was like kind of an eye-opening moment for me, because I was like, I had to pay for my own surgery because even though I had insurance doesn't cover it because they don't consider it to be medically necessary.
Well, and it's even so hard to diagnose. Like women live in pain for years. And I know lots of people who had PCOS or endometriosis. Endometriosis. That's a tricky one.
That's a tongue twister.
But it took them years to get diagnosed. And like, yeah, who's fighting for that? Like, who's the voice for that? I mean, you, but you would think feminism would care about that and would want women to have that access to that type of health care.
Yes. And to like good endometriosis care, because then even once you find out that you have it, a lot of times you're just thrown birth control pills, which now more and more information is coming out that that's actually not a solution to endometriosis. It can make it worse. It can increase your chances of getting certain cancers and things. So it's like, not only is it, hard to get diagnosed, but then they're kind of throwing gas on the fire in a sense. And so, and even if the feminist movement starts talking about women's healthcare, it's always birth control because we need it for all our health issues, even though it doesn't really fix the health issues.
And it hurts people.
And abortion. Yes. So those things kind of were a chink in my feminist armor, if you will. And then I also maintained like a pro-life stance. So I thought the entire time that I was a feminist. It was a very wimpy pro-life stance, and it's one that probably I would say is not like, it's definitely different than where I am now. But I definitely was like, we need limits. Like there should be limits here. And also I was frustrated that I thought like, well, we're talking so much about abortion, but what about like once people do become mothers? Like, what are we going to talk about that? Are we going to get help for that? Because we need access to, better working hours for mothers and just all of those sorts of things. And nobody was talking about that. And so those were kind of my two things that made me start to question what was going on.
And I think the abortion one, I haven't even talked about this publicly because I've been scared, but I want to officially come out and say that I am pro-life. And it's so hard because, I have really good friends who have had multiple abortions, some of them. And I mean, I don't think they listen to this podcast, luckily, but I see the damage it did on them mentally and emotionally. And it's probably something that they actually don't recognize as the cause of a lot of their pain. And that's something that is also not really spoken about.
Yeah. And if anybody listening has had an abortion before, I just hope that you know that the Lord doesn't look at you with judgment. Like He wants to offer you forgiveness and redemption, and He wants to heal that place in your heart and in your mind. He wants to bring healing to that. And so I think sometimes when, especially like really hardcore pro-life people talk about it, that's the one thing that I just like to make sure that I put out there is like, this is not about shaming people who have had abortions or who have been tempted to have an abortion because they were scared. I think this is part of the absolute crazy psychological war that has been on women, that it would convince us that killing our unborn children is the way to succeed. I mean, that's like a level of psychological warfare that is extremely significant and important to take into account if you are somebody who made that decision. Obviously it's good to take personal responsibility before the Lord and just to get that sense of forgiveness that he wants to offer, his mercy that he wants to offer, but also understanding like culturally what's going on is such deception that many people are making this decision not fully informed. That's really
not fully informed, and also under the disguise of you can't live your life if you have a baby, and your life is going to be terrible if you go through with his pregnancy.
There's so much fear.
And I think like
thrown on there.
And like I've seen so many times, like I have a friend who had a baby at the age of 16. She chose not to have an abortion, and she's now a doctor like that. And she did not have she was a parent of a single, or a child of a single parent. And she did not have all the things growing up. She did not grow up with a lot of money. She worked really hard and became what she always wanted to be. And like, I want to see more of those stories.
She sounds amazing.
Right?
I'm like, wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really, really incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess where we were going with that is just there is this war on women in so many ways, and what is disguised as feminine or feminism is actually anti-woman.
Yes. Yeah. And essentially my process of experiencing this revelation that I had bought into bad science, if you will, when I, a couple years into competing in California, my family relocated again across the country to Tennessee this time. And so we went from LA to Tennessee, which is a big change.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty different. And I wasn't sure if I was going to stay or go because I was in my early 20s. I kind of had been like establishing myself there. And I had imagined that I'd always be there. But I felt just in my heart, the Lord, like, go compete for Miss Tennessee. And so I moved with my parents, and 3 months later competed for Miss Tennessee USA. So I had competed for 3 or 4 years in California, and now I'm like a fish out of water. All of a sudden I'm in the Southern pageant world, which is very different than the California pageant world. And so I just went for it. And 3 months after moving, I won Miss Tennessee USA.
Wow.
And it was this crazy, surreal experience of like preparing for Miss USA. And I also met my husband at the exact same time. So it was like all of these crazy things kind of converging in my life at the same time. But while I was Miss Tennessee USA, I was crowned in 2019. And then we hit January, February 2020.
Yeah.
COVID times. And things got really crazy and very, very political, because then we also hit all of, just all the hot button political issues, and we're going into an election. And it was just a very intense time to be like a public figure who's supposed to be neutral. And so I really tried to maintain like neutrality as much as possible, representing all the people of Tennessee. And it was very challenging because I wanted to talk about these issues. I wanted to talk about what I had been starting to realize about feminism, without disparaging all of feminism as a whole, or people in Tennessee who consider themselves feminists. And so I was like, I'm going to like rebrand feminism. That was my whole thing as Miss Tennessee, was we're going to reclaim it, and we're going to include finally mothers and homemakers and people who are choosing that, and not just glorify people who are choosing to have careers. Like this is a career also. And it was really challenging to do, because there was the national part of the organization. So not the people in Tennessee are amazing as far as the pageant goes, but the national organization, there's very much like a silencing of voices that were sharing anything traditional, conservative, that That's basically how I would sum up
And that's
my
so interesting
experience.
because when I think of like the pageant world, for some reason, I assume that it is conservative. I don't know why.
I think a lot of people think that, and particularly because what comes to most people's mind is Miss America. And Miss
Right.
America was traditionally like a more conservative organization, but I was competing in Miss USA, which is the precursor to Miss Universe, which is definitely it's a modeling competition. It's really it doesn't have a lot of the scholarship components and things that Miss America has.
Okay.
So it was more the stereotype of a pageant, you know. That being said, every single person that I met in that had an amazing like desire to impact the world positively, make a difference, serve others. But that's definitely not the goal of the organization.
Okay.
So I had this experience, and when it came time for Miss USA, I had been really working, you know, we all were, but giving my life to this. And I was excited and I was ready. And what ended up happening is that if you watch Miss USA 2020 competition, you do not see me one time.
What?
Not one time. To the point where there was a time when I was on screen and they put a logo over me. And Miss USA was held in Tennessee that year. So it was just very, very strange. Basically, like the way that the organization had been interacting with me up until a certain point was very one way. And then once I think I must have posted something, or somebody in my family must have said something that wasn't in alignment with kind of their worldview, and all of a sudden things shifted, and it was very, very different. And so, not to be conspiratorial,
Wow.
but you know, you got to trust that
Yeah.
gut feeling when you're like noticing it,
Right.
which I've
So,
learned to trust now.
so were you as a part of your, I don't know, what is it? Is it called like a campaign, or as a part of your like run or
Yeah. I call it my reign. I
your
guess I
reign?
think that's what
Okay.
we call it.
Yeah. Okay. So were you speaking of these things during that?
Yes, but like in a very kosher way. I mean,
Okay.
it was very much like a feminism is still good, but let's just make it better. Let's
Yeah.
make it better
Okay.
by including mothers and women. And so what at this during this time I was also going from being more like politically middle of the road to being more politically conservative in my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't sharing any of that publicly at all,
Yeah.
especially during that time, because again, I was representing all of Tennessee and not trying to be divisive. Um, so I don't know exactly what it was, but the bottom line was that the message that was clearly communicated to several of us, and there were some things that I could stories that I could tell where you'd go, oh, you're not like making this up, but I don't share some of those stories because I'm not trying to make it like a drama about, oh, look what like so and so did at this pageant organization.
Yeah.
Um, it's more yeah, my passion is more about encouraging women in their femininity. So I try to stay out of like the pageant drama world. But there were things that happened that made it very clear that while they were publicly professing to be an organization that gave all types of women a voice and a platform, what it really was an organization that wanted to platform women who are sharing very politically correct perspectives, and perspectives that would benefit the organization. And so anybody who would possibly rock the boat a little bit was silenced, not seen on TV. And I understand from a business perspective, you know, whatever. But I think an organization where young women are giving years of their life to it,
Yeah.
you know, and claiming to be a feminist organization, we represent feminism. This is what feminism is all about, is promoting all women. So these were kind of some of my experiences that then encouraged me to research, you know, ideologically, what is feminism? What was it originally? And that's when I started going, oh, it's not that feminism has become a problem. It's that it's always been a problem. Um, these the silencing of certain voices, the attack on men, the
Mm-hmm.
attack on actually embracing our femininity, embracing our motherhood, all these things are actually baked into the feminist pie.
Mm-hmm.
And so no wonder I can't reclaim it, because that's what it is at a core level. So I can't make it prettier by throwing more sparkles on it. It's got to be uprooted. So it was at that point that I was like, I can't actually honestly call myself a feminist anymore. I can't morally do that for myself. I have friends who do consider themselves feminists that are, off-brand feminists. But for me personally, I can't call myself that anymore. And so that process was really difficult, and I felt very lonely and isolated in a lot of that. But I also, why I am so passionate about it now is because it brought so much peace and clarity to my life. And embracing my femininity, which has been years long and will probably be a lifetime journey, process has been so life-giving and so wonderful. And it's just exciting knowing that God created us, men and women. He created us with masculinity and femininity, and he hid parts of himself. He chose to allow us to be image bearers of his. And so it's so exciting to see, like, God, the intentionality that you had in designing me as a woman. It, like, I used to feel like I had to like strive to prove something, and I realized like embracing femininity is like a resting in an identity, and there's no striving. It's just like enjoyment of who he created you to be, and discovering that process.
And I think I was such I want to say a victim of this, but also taking accountability. I bought into the whole concept. And especially reading your book, it opened my eyes so much to some conditioning that I still had. What I love about your book is there's journaling prompts. So you really like dive in and think about, who do I think I am as a woman? What do I think being a woman means? And to really put pen to paper and think about these things, I realized that I still have these ideas of what you need to do or be in order to be a successful, quote unquote, woman. And I know for myself, it was like, okay, you need to like have the business and do all the things and make X amount of money. And that's what makes you interesting. And that's what makes you enviable. And that's what makes people want to be around you. And it's like, I don't want to be enviable. Like, I want people to feel good around me just by who I am, by my heart. I don't want to have to perform. And that's our relationship with God. It's not about our works. It's about our heart. And just deprogramming that has been such a hard thing for me. Even when I think about my relationship with God, like it's like that has kind of passed over into my spirituality, because I think I have to perform. I think I have to like do all these things, rather than if we as women put as much energy into our hearts as we do our image and what people are going to think about us and our success and our accolades, like imagine how much peace we would have and how much peace we would have to share with the world.
That's so true. That was something that if I write another book in the future, I would add, because since writing my book, I have been married a couple more years and I have a son now. And something that has helped me so much in this process is talking with a Christian counselor. And so she's like fully, professional, understands how our brains work and all those things, but a believer. And so encouraging me in the right ways. And it's been so helpful just to become more self-aware of, where am I like striving and not relying on the Lord? Where am I believing lies about him? And so that's something that I would encourage women, if I write another book in the future, to do during that process. Or it doesn't even have to be, you can journal with yourself, which is why I put the journaling prompts in the book, but just taking that time to externally, verbalize, oh, this is actually what I believe. Like, I didn't even realize I believe this. And I'm acting like I believe this, but I actually believe this other thing. And so it really helps like bring those things to mind, and like you were saying, deprogramming. And I grew up, again, homeschooled Christian home, very sheltered from, a lot of like just cultural norm things. And I still was greatly affected by feminism. And so all that to say, if you're like, I don't think I was, you are.
Yeah.
Unless you grew up like Amish.
Yeah.
And then there's other things you got to work through,
Yeah.
you know? So
I notice a lot in my marriage as well. And there's these buzzwords, are these
yes.
ideas of how a woman is supposed to get everything she wants. And I love how you mentioned in your book that we've never been taught how a man wants to be loved. It's very clear, like women, it's like we want to be a princess and we want to be provided for and protected. But what about men? Like how, and I'd love to ask you that question. Like, how has your understanding of men changed and what they need in this journey?
I mean, it's been huge. It's been a huge shift for me. I grew up with just sisters. I have a brother, but he was adopted once we were all older, so I didn't grow up with boys. And I just thought everybody was the same. I don't know. I just took for granted, like, yeah, we're the same. We have the same capacity for emotion, for communication, all these things. I was just like, men are just physically bigger sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't a very helpful perspective going into marriage. And so a book that was hugely helpful for me in this process of learning about the way that men think is called Fascinating Womanhood. I like the Timeless edition better because it's been like modernized, but she even goes into the neuroscience of the differences between men and women. And I was like, wait, hold on. We're different. And things like men's ability to communicate emotion. I didn't know that our right and left hemispheres as women are very integrated. So on one hemisphere, you're dealing with emotion, and the other hemisphere is communication. So our ability to take our emotion and put a word to it is very innate for us. Men do not have as much integration right and left. So they have all the same feelings. They have the same ability to communicate, but they don't have the ability to communicate what's happening on the other side of the brain as well as we do. But they have more front and back integration. And I can't remember exactly which parts of the brain are the front and the back, but essentially it's like a lot of the things that we think of as male things. And so feminism has literally demonized a biological reality about men's brains. They are unable to communicate about their emotions the same way that women are.
Yeah.
And instead of being frustrated with our partners, which I still have to work on, I'm still constantly growing in, full transparency.
Yeah.
But it's so helpful to at least know, like, he's not choosing to not communicate about his emotions right now. He's not choosing to not get what I'm saying. He actually like doesn't get it. And there's probably a lot of things that he's having that same experience towards me. And so it's so important. I think I talk about this in my book of just having wonder and awe towards the areas that were different instead of despising it. So instead of being like, oh my gosh, I wish that like he understood my emotions, like being interested, like, this is like mysterious. This is so cool. This is like part of the masculine nature of God. And it's a mystery and I don't understand it, but that's cool. Like, I want to ask questions. I want to get to know more. And so that process, I think that the most important part about it is just knowing that we're different.
Yeah.
So that you don't make assumptions, negative assumptions about your partner in the process.
And take it personally and like make it mean something, like make stories up about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I do that. Obviously, you just don't care.
And it does feel that way sometimes. And sometimes, like, I definitely go down that path. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I know that we're different. And when I am being, as you would probably consider it, hyper emotional, I need you to be gracious towards me.
Yes, so, exactly.
Yeah, it is a process.
Yes. One of the questions I get asked the most is what to do if your husband is not a believer or not as into it as you. Maybe he says he's a believer, but he's not doing the spiritual work and he's not, leading in the spiritual realm of your marriage.
Yeah. So I think it's in 1 Peter. Actually, I wrote it down. It's 1 Peter 3:1-2. And it's addressing this question. Paul is addressing this question because, for those of you who aren't as like familiar with the Bible, Paul wrote the epistles, the majority of the epistles, which are it's another way of saying letters. And they were to the different churches that had developed after Jesus ascended back into heaven. And they were dealing with a lot of the questions that we deal with today as humans. And so the epistles are so great for just like practical ways of dealing with all kinds of things, marriage, parenting, like whatever, whatever your questions are, that's like such a great place to start. And so he talks about, if any of you are married to men who are not believers, you should stay married to them. And again, this is advice for people who are not in abusive relationships. So people who are not in abusive relationships, this is it. This is for you. If that's not you, then I definitely recommend going and getting Christian counsel and getting help resolving that situation, because that's a whole other, situation. Don't stay in a dangerous situation. That's not what Paul's talking about here. But he talks about how your purity and your godly conduct can actually soften the heart of your partner. And so that's really easy to say, right? Like, as a person married to a Christian man, that's really easy for me to say. And so I also want to validate how like difficult that would be, and painful, and probably lonely at different times. And just know that the Lord wants to meet you in that, and he wants to sustain you, and he wants to give you that fulfillment in your heart, that place of connection that you're longing for with your husband. And he really can come in and have that close friendship with you. And so just ask for that, and he will meet you there. And it's still painful, but just know that like the compassion of the Lord is there with you in that. But yeah, I think just focusing on, okay, you know what? This is good advice, whether your husband is married or not. I mean, whether your husband is Christian or not.
Yeah.
Is focus on you. Like, okay, am I doing the things that God has asked me to do? Because that's my job and I cannot control my partner. And that's it. That's all, we can really do.
Yeah.
And obviously that gets more complicated once you add children to the mix and things like that. And so there has to be like, some level of working together, cooperation, and making those decisions. But as far as like faith goes, just saying, you know what, there's nothing that I can do outside of just being an example. And the best way to be an example is to actually fall in love with Jesus and experience his love. And when you're overflowing with his love, it's contagious.
Yeah.
Like, and not in a forced way. Like, I'm going to just, in my own strength, act so good and so godly. Like, it really has to come from a spiritual transformation from the inside out. And I think when you experience that, you're in that, that you're in his grace, that you're like, oh, like I feel so loved. And I know just a greater depth of the Lord's love now that naturally flows out to your spouse.
Yeah. And I am in this situation because I am a new believer, and it actually doesn't hurt me or affect me that much. Like, obviously it would be really nice, but he's so supportive, and he'll come to church with me here and there. And
that's
as
amazing.
I talk, he'll listen to me talk about things, but I never try to convince him of anything. Like, I'm
so
just more like, look at this like awesome revelation I've had, and or this dream that I had, or what I read today in the Bible was so amazing and it resonated so much. And I think just being excited about it has been really helpful and made him more inquisitive as well. And yeah, I think it's another thing to look at is God delaying my husband's coming to faith because there are things that I need to learn first? Am I somehow putting my happiness in my husband's hands? Are there other things that I need to take accountability for that I'm not taking accountability for, and either like blaming or depending too much on my husband for? And then realizing, okay, these things I'm going to bring to God instead, and strengthening your relationship with God. And I believe that as I do that, it's going to bring my husband closer to God.
Yeah. It's like, it's hard because it's basically you have to genuinely be like just fixed on the Lord, and then it will peripherally take care of itself somehow, or trust that the Lord, even if you don't see progress being made, so to speak, that the Lord is working in the lives of your spouse or anybody that it is that you're just praying for that conversion experience for.
I think he's praying in private. He just doesn't want to admit it.
I could see that too, you know. It probably has something to do with the front back brain integration,
exactly.
you know. That's amazing.
I love that.
We'll be praying for him.
We'll be praying for him. Yeah. So another thing, and this is totally along the same vein, is like you mentioned in the book that I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but along the lines of the wife is the soul and the husband is the body. Is that right?
I think that's a great like image. I can't remember if that's the exact one I used in the book either. Because yeah, I probably at some point phrased it like that.
Yeah.
Or I even have, you know, for the computer geeks, I'm like, okay, it's like they're the computer machine and we're like the software, you know, you need both.
Yes.
Neither one is more important than the other, but they just have different roles. And yeah, I think that, or a more poetic way of putting it is they are like the machine or the body. Yeah. And we're like the spirit bringing life into it. And there's a quote from the Talmud, which is one of the Jewish holy books. And it says, I never call my wife wife. I call her home because she is who makes my home. And back in my feminist era, I would have heard that and been like, that's so backwards. You're just limiting her to the home. And then now I see that so differently. I'm like, home. He's not talking about just like
house.
She made me a sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's saying that's like his place, like his home, his safety. And it's such an honor to be able to fill that role in anyone's life. And, you know, with like my son, I get to do that with my husband, with future children, whoever comes into our home, I get to create that environment. And I think it's crazy how effective the feminist propaganda has been at convincing us that that's not valuable. When that's kind of like the thing that everyone longs for, everyone desires. It's a universal human experience of the longing for home, the longing for a place that you feel safe and that you can rest. And as women, we get to be that. We get to be the people who steward that. And so whether that is in some seasons in a career or not, that's the calling, if you will, is to be like a spiritual mother and to create a spiritual home. And also during some seasons, a physical home that shares about that spiritual reality. And so it's once my eyes were open to it, I was like, wait, how did they ever convince us that this isn't like the greatest thing ever?
I know. And I'm just realizing that I'm 38 years old. I'm 37, turning 38. But I feel like I've just started realizing this in the last couple of years. And I get so mad at myself. I'm like, oh, you've like wasted so many good years. But I believe that God will redeem me. I thought that I didn't want to have a kid. I thought that kids were going to ruin your life. But deep down it came from not thinking I would be a good enough mother, not thinking I was worthy of being a mother. But I masked that with all of these, you know, wanting all these accomplishments. And yeah, but now I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to I want to be the wife. And that feels amazing to me. And I do want to start trying to have, to get pregnant. And, you know, it's like anyone that knows me, it's like, will be like, wow, that's crazy. Because I always said for so long, I didn't want to have kids, but it was from a place of sadness and like hurt. And I'm just so grateful that God found me and showed me the truth, because I see still like so many women in my old circles that are anti-marriage, anti-children, and are just about traveling and success. And my heart hurts for them because I know it's not from a place of truth. So yeah,
it's so painful to see that and to hear that from, you know, there's many women that I read while preparing my book and studying for it who would be in their 50s or 60s by the time they realized that feminism had lied to them. And at that point they couldn't have children anymore. And it was just, they were really sad. And, you know, I still believe that even in that situation, like God can absolutely bring redemption and there are situations where you can spiritually mother someone or adopt, or, there's countless ways that God can bring redemption to that. But if you read the women who founded feminism, especially the second wave of feminism, actually all of them, even the pre-feminist things that were happening during the French Revolution, if you read their life stories, almost every single one of them had a broken relationship with their mom and or their dad, and like really traumatic things, every kind of abuse, and just you hear the stories and you're like, oh, it's really obvious that this is what created feminism. This is what's downstream of that. And so we allowed women who had experienced like horrific traumas and never healed from them. They created new worldviews around these ideas and then piggybacked on postmodernism and Marxist ideology and convinced a couple generations of women that they should live out the same broken life that they had to live out. And just spreading that pain and brokenness. And so once I saw that again, I had already been disillusioned. But then once I saw the history, I was like, oh, this was always here. And I just didn't see it before. It's been so whitewashed. It's been so painted over to make it seem like the second wave feminist leaders were these really amazing, like shattering glass ceilings kind of women. And they weren't. They were just broken women who allowed their anger to fuel them and to help them reach fame and influence.
I feel like is still a balance of, I know for myself, I do believe that God has a big purpose for my life and that I am meant to do big things. How can women find that balance of, I know I'm meant to be out there doing good, serving others, and that will probably be some kind of success, and there probably will be financial success that comes with that. But how can I move towards that while still being rooted in the true purpose behind it? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the, I want more followers and I want more money and all those things. Like, tapping into your feminism doesn't mean you just stay at home. I think God has big purposes for a lot of women. So how can we feel into what is God's will for my life, and how can I do that in a God-centered way?
Yeah. I think there's not like a right or wrong answer to this because, everybody's situation is so different. But I would say a really important thing to have in mind is that your entire life, likely you were fed lies about the value of the home, about the value of caring for your home, of cooking meals for your family, of being there for your children. And you have to know that that is what formed your way of thinking. I have to tell myself this. I have to go, that's what formed my thought process. And so my natural instinct is going to be a little bit out of balance towards career success because I feel all those same things. I'm like, I should be doing something.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm literally doing like 15 different jobs in my house in this season. Having like a toddler is crazy. I always was like, oh, they just have one kid. I'm like, no, it's so much. One kid is still so much. It's amazing, but it's a lot. And so I think just keeping that in mind while you're processing things, I think is really, really helpful. So not just choosing other things because the home things don't feel important. Now, that's not to say that also like other things like you're talking about outside of the home aren't important, but just understanding that likely your instincts have been skewed to value things outside the home as more successful than things inside the home.
Yeah.
I think another thing is that there are seasons. So obviously not everybody can do this, but I am a huge believer in staying home with your children for the first few years of their life.
Yeah.
And there's just so many studies that have shown that children need a secure attachment, and that in order to form a secure attachment, they need at least the first 3 years of their life with their mother, and preferably the first 6 years. So if you can do that, I think that's an extremely worthy cause of sacrificing other things for. There's nothing better than like There's no career you're going to have that's greater than like actually forming another human being. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind is there's seasons as well. So I love politics and I could see myself going into politics in the future, but I'm not even going there in my mind right now because I'm like, this is, I guess, a practical example of how I walk this out. I'm like, cool, that's so awesome to know that the Lord is using things that I don't even know of right now to prepare me for whatever he has in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's not on me.
Yeah.
I don't have to like strive and worry about it. Maybe through homeschooling my kids, because I want to homeschool, maybe through homeschooling my kids, I'm going to like learn all kinds of things that I need to learn in order to do a great job at whatever God has next for me.
Yeah.
And just trusting that you can fully give yourself to the season that he has you in. So if he has you working, that's hard sometimes when you're longing for like motherhood and marriage, and that's not happening in that season. But I think it's just embracing the season that you're in, trusting that the Lord is working through that season to prepare you for the next, and not having your eyes so fixed on the future that you miss out on what is he doing right here in this present moment with you.
That's so true. And I think when it's your time to switch seasons, he'll tell you.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like, there's a part of me that's like, okay, I need to do this and I need to launch this new business that's about God. And like, I need to do all these things for him. But then he hasn't shown me yet. Like I have ideas, but it doesn't feel like the right time. So I don't know. I guess like part of me is like, the balance between like waiting for the right thing and just like doing it. But to your point, it's like, this probably is just a season for me to focus on trying to get pregnant. And then down the road.
That's a big season.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and I think for us ambitious girls, something that the Lord had to really highlight in my life that I struggle with is doing things for God instead of doing things with God. And it's really, really hard to not do that when you're ambitious because we have creativity, we have the energy, we have the skills to go for it. And it can feel like, well, I'm wasting myself if I'm not like pushing myself to my max and like doing all of this. And I have good ideas, but it's like God wants all of that to flow from intimacy with him, not like, God, look what I did for you. Look what I did for you. He like wants to do it with us. And that's a huge thing that the Lord is always having to rope me back in and go, Justice, hey, you're doing it again. And I go, okay, you're right. And thankfully, my husband is also God's voice. God speaks through him a lot about that. So I'll be like, I think I'm going to start this thing. And he's like, I think that you're in a different season right now.
Yeah, literally exactly the same. Right. My husband the other day was like, okay, so you're saying you want to get pregnant, but you're also saying you want to start a new business. Like, you realize like those aren't going to go together, right? Like, fair.
Yeah.
Oh, so funny.
Sadly, the energy is not there during pregnancy to do all the things.
Yes, exactly. Oh my goodness. Well, this was so amazing and so lovely. You're an angel. This has just been awesome.
Thank you. You are so kind. I really enjoyed talking with you.
You too. So where can everyone buy your book and find you online?
Yes. So my Instagram is basically my only social media that I'm active on right now because, again, toddler life, I'm like chasing him around all the time, not a lot of time online. So my handle is at Justice Hope Kuehl. And then my book, you can purchase that. There's a link in my bio on my Instagram. That's probably the best way. And I actually have a code for your listeners.
Ooh.
And I forgot it.
Oh.
So I'm going to give that to you.
And I will share it in the show notes.
In the caption, or in the show notes. But I just wanted to give a special to your listeners. And the special is that for basically at cost for me, you can get my book and a journal with a really nice journaling pen from Rifle Paper. So it kind of gives you everything you need to go through the book and do the journaling and all the things.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I'm gonna order another one so I can get the journal.
That's awesome.
Justice, thank you so much. And everyone, please check out Justice and all her things. I'm gonna link you guys in the show notes. Give her a DM. Give me a DM. Let us know how you like the episode. Share it. Rate us all the stars. Leave a nice comment. And we will catch you guys next week. Bye, guys.